the future of restaurants, it's a pretty big topic, right? And so what we're going to try to do is cover a lot of ground, knowing that there are a lot of rabbit holes that we can go down. But we want to look at sort of what they're going to look like for diners, because as Larry said, we have all, and I will join him in saying how much we have missed restaurants this year. But also really want to look at the nuts and bolts of how they operate, and more importantly, how that is going to be different than it was before. Because the truth is that, you know, long before any of us had ever heard of the coronavirus, the restaurant business model was pretty shaky. And restaurants paid their hardworking staffs pretty much relatively low wages. This is not an insult to anybody here on the panel. It's a tough business. And if they were lucky, you know, they were barely eking out a living. And not only that, but the wages were often fairly inequitable. You know, servers in the front of the house would earn more than the cooks in the kitchen. And then even then you'd have white servers. You would hear lots of stories about how white servers would earn more than servers of color in the front of the house. And then in the kitchens, there were sort of problems too that we've heard a lot about over the last year, about how hierarchical they were, how stressful, that in some cases they were hotbeds of sexual harassment. So there was a lot that needed to be worked on. And I remember that the first phone call that I made to a chef that I knew in South Carolina, I called her because I said, you know, how is this all going to shake out? And I looked at my calendar before this, and it was April 4th, 2020, which I thought was enough time, since the pandemic had, you know, come down on us. That was enough time to kind of figure out this all out, right? Which is ridiculous, obviously. And even now, I feel like 14 months in, there are still a lot of questions about how things are going to shape up. And there's this piece of me that feels a little bit guilty bringing all these people together and asking them, well, what's going to happen? Because, you know, chefs are battered, and they, as Larry alluded to, they have made these endless pivots to, you know, meal kits and delivery and condiments and feeding the needy and all of these things at the same time. And they just probably need a break, and they're just happy that they've survived. But at the same time, it's really this perfect moment to have this conversation, because crises are always an opportunity if you take advantage of it. And I think that I've heard from a lot of people that, you know, people knew things were difficult and wrong and that they would have liked to have changed them, but how do you drive, you know, 80 miles an hour down the highway and change the tires at the same time? And so this brought everything to a stop and made everybody innovate and think. And so we're going to talk to some really amazing chefs and restaurateurs who have been thinking very deeply about all of these questions. And so with us, we have Sean Feeney. He's wearing two hats tonight. One is as the co-owner of Brooklyn's Lilia and Misi, but also he was a co-founder of the Independent Restaurant Coalition that did some amazing advocacy work that we're going to talk about at the start of our panel. I have, trying to go in order here on the screen, Irena Stein, who's the co-owner of Baltimore's Alma Cocina Latina. We have, who's next? Ellen Yin, who everybody in Philadelphia no doubt knows, the owner of Fork and High Street Philly. And last but certainly not least, we have Nicole Marquis, who is the owner of HipCityVeg. So we are going to talk and we'll leave about 10 or 15 minutes for questions at the end. So feel free to put your questions into the Q&A and we will bring them up. We can collect them there and ask them at the end. And I'm going to start with Sean. You know, I wanted to talk about the industry-wide issues before we get into some specifics of your experiences, because one of the things that the pandemic made happen was that, you know, the independent restaurant community really came together in a way that they hadn't before. You were really successful. Congress this year allocated $28.5 billion to help independent restaurants. And I want to tell you to tell me a little bit about how that happened. Like, take us back to March, you know, that crazy time, and how you all came together and what some of the networks, how those networks have been forged, and, you know, about what you're going to do with them now.
Yeah, I first of all, it's awesome to be with you all. You're all legends, and I'm so honored to have this night tonight with you all, and thank you. I would say March 15th, we shut the restaurants down in New York City, and on March 20th, I got a call from my buddy Will Guidera, and he was starting the IRC. That was going to be a national coalition of restaurant owners, independent restaurant owners. And he said, you know, I'm not exactly sure what it's going to look like, but we're just going to start having calls at 9 o'clock every morning to have, you know, group therapy almost, and to try to figure this out. And a lot of the people on the calls originally, we didn't even realize how bad it was in New York. It was scary, but a lot of people on the calls were from the West Coast that were going through it for a couple weeks. In the early days, it was really problem solving and just listening to how bad it was on the West Coast, and it was coming to the East Coast. And then it turned into, they announced the PPP, and realizing that the pandemic was kind of going to be more than 8 weeks long. And we were gonna have to try to get that PPP extended to 24. And 7 weeks into the RC being opened, a few of us went to the White House for a restaurant roundtable to try and get changes to the PPP.
And sorry, PPP, I already forgot what it stood for because there've been too many acronyms. It was the
payroll
protection plan.
Plan or program.
Right. And what it did, just for people briefly, and we don't need to get too much into this, but it gave you money if you kept people employed. But the trick with restaurants is that the restaurants had been forcibly shut down by the city. So how are you supposed to keep people employed? And so you could only get money if you had people employed, but you didn't need people. And so it was a mess.
Yeah. And so in the early days, there was probably like 20 of us on the call every morning. And we realized that there were some pretty powerful voices there. I was in awe of the people I was talking to every day because they were my heroes. And we just got a lobbying firm to help us get into the right rooms. During that time, I was like, wow, this IRC thing's working really well. I should try and start one up in New York City with a couple friends. And we did that as well. And all these conversations that we were having with other operators and owners were awesome because we've never really talked before in a real way. And a lot of those conversations early on have led to some great things. And it has been a huge fight, but I think what is going to come out of it will be very impactful, where we now have seats at the tables, whether it's at a federal, state, or city level in most of these major cities where restaurants are. And I think it's just fighting for a healthier industry going forward, respected profession, and a sustainable industry.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. In other countries, they just helped everyone. But in America, of course, we had to go industry by industry, restaurants, airlines, whoever it is. It's questionable strategy, but here we are. Ellen, you were on some of those calls too, and you had said to me that you felt that part of it was a realization that you weren't alone and that you hadn't had those conversations before. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what that was like and why you never had those. I mean, was it because you felt you were competing with each other, or was it just that it was so busy nobody had time to kind of sit down and say, hey, what can we do to make this better?
Well, I will say that at the very beginning, it was Tyler Aiken and Gia Vecchio from Stock and Foxglove Communications who introduced me to the IRC. And, it was extremely helpful because, people like Sean, Kevin Boehm from Boca in Chicago did so much work by the time I entered the scene to be able to explain how the PPP worked. What the problems with the PPP were. And by the way, the PPP, we were talking earlier about, multiple industries. The PPP was not just available to restaurants, it was available to all industries. But it didn't work for the restaurant industry exactly because of what you said, Sean, that most of us weren't able to be open. Why did we not ever speak to each other? I'm not sure. I think we're always just busy. Restaurateurs are the first people that get called upon when there's a community fundraiser or that, people need something. So I'm not sure why we were, never really talked about some of the intricacies of the business, or maybe there's some level of, I don't think it's necessarily competition, but maybe there's some level of, hey, I'm not doing as well as people might think I'm doing. And so maybe I don't really want to, just lay out all my cards on the table.
Right.
It's a tough industry. I mean, you know, the range of types of operation range from corporate to like small mom and pop. And so sometimes, you know, when there's some sort of collaboration, it's really hard sometimes when you're dealing with different types of businesses. But I think in the IRC that there were there was a lot of alignment of the types, because they were all smaller operators, and you could really relate to that.
Yeah, I mean, we've all learned to be vulnerable over the last year, have we not? You know, I'm going to use that dreadful restaurant word, pivot, for a second here. I'll try not to use it too many times tonight. That and journey, you know, just eviscerate from the conversation. But, you know, one of the issues that a lot of restaurants are grappling with right now is finding staff, and a lot of businesses. And we're going to dig into that, but because there are a lot of reasons that could be happening. You know, it could be, some people say it's because they're unemployment benefits. Some people, I would argue, don't have childcare yet because schools haven't opened up yet. And summer is going to be tricky as well. You know, some people may be afraid to come back, but one big reason, no doubt, is the pay, right? And the pay in the restaurant industry is generally low. And Nicole, I want to bring you in here because you have stepped up at HipCityVeg and you have a proposal and a plan for your business. Can you tell us about it?
Yes, thank you so much. And it really is such an honor to be on this panel with all of you. We announced about a month ago, 15 for our families, which is our commitment to raising the starting wage at HipCityVeg and all of our restaurants in Marquis & Co group to $15 an hour starting wage. And that's going to begin this July 1st, 2021. And it's really our commitment to, you know, showing our employees how much we value them through our actions. This has been, like you mentioned, a tremendous year for restaurant workers. We went through 2 rounds of layoffs, and in many ways, this was traumatic for our employees. It's a mixed bag of reasons why our employees are looking to other industries right now. I think by the second round of layoffs in late October, November of 2020, some of our employees said, hey, we need to find something stable for our family. And we don't know if you're going to be open in a month or 2 months. There's no end in sight. And who could blame them? It was really difficult. A lot of our employees moved out of the city altogether to move home with family members. There was no work for them. They couldn't pay their rent in the city, high rents here. They said, I'm going to move with my family where it's safe. And like you mentioned, a lot of our employees are single parents with very unreliable childcare during the pandemic, or no childcare at all. So it's really a mixed bag of reasons that has really affected the workforce. And we've had one challenge after another. It's just been a year of challenges. So right. This is our newest challenge. We decided to make this move in the company before the hiring crunch. We felt it was the right time for us because, of everything we've been through. We really were in the trenches together.
So does that mean that everyone starting in July gets bumped to 15, or you start at 15 and then it goes up from there?
This is going to affect around 100 of our employees.
Okay.
Company. And that means in July, about 100 people will see an immediate increase to $15 an hour. And from there, every new employee that starts at that wage will have an opportunity to start at $15 an hour. And I think why this is really important, I think it's because it's about offering careers rather than jobs right now. And that's what our employees are really demanding. We're seeing that major shift from wanting, sort of a gig job, quick, easy, flexible hours to more building a career and a real profession. And I think when you're starting at $15 an hour, it's a really strong place to jump off from and create that career. It reminds me, I was mentioning to you the other day of an employee of mine. He started off as an $11 an hour line cook at our fast casual restaurant, and so talented. We quickly moved him to $15 an hour, and gave him a few more responsibilities. Well, what happened was really amazing. He then had that confidence, because we were investing in him, to invest back in us. And he became an assistant manager, general manager, now is in DC, opening our DC locations, and will soon be a regional manager. Those are the types of stories that are very important for people. And also, really, you'll see all of us benefit from that type of story. And at the end of the day, it also makes really good business sense.
So I want to just ask you one quick follow-up, and then I want to move on to Irena to bring her into the conversation. But we will come back to this issue later about what it means for diners. But you're raising everybody's salary. So have you raised prices?
You know, we're going to factor this in to our prices like we do everything else every year. We look at rent increase, food cost increase. And in the short term, this is definitely going to increase our expenses for sure. But I truly believe that in the long term, this is going to help with retention. This is going to help with turnover and recruiting, which we all know is so expensive.
Right.
But at the end of the day, this is going to, and I think more importantly, help with culture, which maybe it's not the right move for every business, but for a company that's looking to grow, culture is what drives profit. Culture is what drives longevity and is what helps a business build something that's going to last.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think, generally, there's been a lot of talk about how restaurants are families, but then restaurants haven't always treated their workers like family, or maybe they have treated them like family because we're all mean to our families. I don't know, but it is a really important thing to kind of give people, have people feel stable and safe, right, in their jobs. Irena, I want to talk to you because you have always, for a long time, have paid a higher wage, $15 or $16 an hour, I think. And one of the ways that you are going to keep raising those wages is by changing the way you operate based on something you learned during the pandemic. So tell us about Alquimia and how it came to be and what it is, and then what that means for you having a more sustainable business, both for you and for your employees.
Mm-hmm. So we were as fast as Sean, after the lockdown occurred mid-March. 4 days later, we entered conversation with a small catering company that generally works with refugees and immigrants from basically West Africa, Syria, etc. And we joined into a dialogue because they were approached very quickly by certain communities in Baltimore to provide food for those communities because the Hispanic community and the most underserved communities were going to run out of food pretty quickly because they lost their jobs, first of all, and the kids also didn't go to school anymore, and the school was the one providing the first, the main meal of a lot of families here. And so we found ourselves in the situation that we had a front of the house, primarily American, so with the possibility of unemployment or applying for unemployment. And then we had a largely Hispanic kitchen with all the realities that all of you know what they mean, but also because we're a Venezuelan restaurant, we had people that have applied as political exile, political refugees, or they had come here on their exceptional talent, and none of those people had the possibility to get any benefits. And so we started, we joined forces, the two companies, and we started producing. At the beginning, it was something like 750 meals a day. It was insane. And pretty much the same communities. We started with 5 or 6 communities, and we would try to rotate the needs. And then World Central Kitchen really came along a month later, and that was a huge support for us and a huge model that I wanted to talk a little bit about because World Central Kitchen, their model was to provide each meal, $10 for each meal. And as you know, the government that provides food in general for schools or people in need, their budget is $3 to $5, and that includes the production and everything. So everybody's on minimum wage, and the food is not good, full of carbohydrates, etc. So with this model of and this budget of World Central Kitchen, we were able to immediately start paying living wage for the people that joined, you know, for both companies and all the employees that joined this effort as cooks. We started paying $16 an hour. And then out of the $10 that we were getting from World Central Kitchen, we decided to save 10% for anybody needing medical help. So that started completely generating a stability aside from the grants and private donations that we were having. So at the beginning, it was really about community, because I come from Venezuela, and I have seen hunger in a really close fashion for many, many years. The last 22 years, the country has suffered a horrendous situation in terms of food, medicine, etc. And so we had been helping with Venezuela. So it was a very natural thing to start thinking about our community and said, oh my God, okay, so this situation with COVID makes us reflect upon our lives, like all of us, but also philosophically reflect who are we as food professionals, you know, besides the home where we, you know, or the house, which is our restaurant, where we welcome our guests. And immediately, of course, when you think philosophically, we think that we have a certain responsibility to also help in providing food and good food to those communities in need. And it was perfect for Baltimore. Baltimore is a much smaller city than where you all live. And so in a way, it's an easier city where we can unite forces and help so many underserved communities in terms of food. So anyway, what we've been doing ever since is giving a very well-balanced meal every single day to the same communities. We've been stable. We've done about 125,000 meals thus far since last March. World Central is no longer part of our budget, but we do it with grants and donations.
And sorry, I just want to, so I can bring different people in, but the point is that even though the restaurant is open again and you're going back to being a restaurant, this is still part of your business, feeding those communities. And you think, I think I'm right in saying that it not only is good for the community, but it strengthens your business. And I wonder if you could just speak to that briefly.
Yes, we moved locations, and we designed our new kitchen based on committing to continue these meals in the morning and then doing our restaurant in the afternoon. And so at the beginning, it was all for the community, but in the end, it helped us with rent. It helped us with electric bill, the gas, etc. So it's become a benefit both ways. And we plan to continue on doing that. So if you see our kitchen, the kitchen is distributed. So in the morning is community meals, in the evening, and it rotates really well by now.
And I want to sort of open that idea up to the other people on the panel to sort of say, I don't know if anybody else did community feeding and you're sticking with that, but some of these other pivots that people made, you know, meal kits, condiments, delivery, pasta kits, I know you were doing at Lilia, you know, are those going to stick around? What you've learned by having to change to survive going to be part of your future businesses, or do you just go back to being a restaurant as we used to understand a restaurant? Anybody?
Can I just hop in for a minute? I think the answer is yes. I just want to go back to what Irena was saying, that one of the things that came out of the CARES Act is actually that FEMA is going to be able to pay restaurants 100% reimbursement. So it won't be $3 to $5. And you know, a number of restaurants in Philadelphia, like Barbacoa, Bowology, Fork, you know, have been working to work with the city of Philadelphia and with a number of nonprofit organizations to try to figure out how to apply to FEMA for this emergency money. It's like a 6-month project. Mm-hmm. And to feed the 15 zip codes that were identified as in need, I believe they were saying that it was like a $6 million project. But I think that for small restaurants, because the main discussion of these groups has been that to feed the community, and Irena, you can, I'm sure that you can relate to this, you know, so when Fork started doing frontline worker meals, we were doing chicken with grains and we had fresh asparagus. And I actually got a phone call from somebody from one of the hospitals saying, why are you serving us asparagus? And why are you serving us this, that, and the other thing? And, you know, it really took me, you know, caught me off guard. But the bottom line is that we have to be sensitive culturally to some of these communities and make sure that the food that we're providing them is consistent with what they actually want to eat, and make sure that it's healthy. So, so this group, we've been working for the past, I would say, since January, the beginning of January, to try to figure out how to get this application in. And I know that the James Beard Foundation has been working to try to help other communities do the same thing. But I do think that, you know, Fork will certainly continue to do work like that. And I do think that a lot of changes, I mean, even, you know, we never did takeout before. When I said we were going to do 500 meals a day, my chef was just like, that's impossible. We can't do that. I'm like, yes, we can. We're going to do it differently than what we did before, but we're going to figure it out. I think that right now, if you have a pivot or a change that you know, I think Nicole was talking about QSR codes, that, you know, these changes definitely are going to become part of our daily operations. I mean, if it's working, why would you
turn down an extra revenue stream, right? Like, so Sean, yes on pasta kits forever?
Yeah, we basically spent the entire year of 2019 making this pasta company because it was my partner's dream to have her own pasta company. And early in 2020, we introduced it through these pasta drops. Every Saturday, we would do a drop on Instagram with a pasta and a sauce in a bag in these beautiful packaged bags. And it was a real company. And then we shut it down whenever we shut the restaurants down. We immediately raised money for our team and raised a lot of money in 48 hours. And we realized we had a community that was built that was stronger than we could have ever imagined. So we immediately started a 501c3, a Grove House Family Fund, and raised even more money so that when we started up again, I just bought a couple trucks.
I'm going to stop you for just 1 second. Can everybody hear Sean? Okay, I can't really hear Sean, but I just want to make sure that everyone in the audience can, and everyone's just not being polite. Okay, I can hear you, but you sound like you're very far away.
Okay, I'll bring it closer. So
okay.
we got a couple trucks and started delivering pasta in these vans, and I became a delivery driver. And as we were selling more, my partner Missy got more excited to do more. And as we were selling more, we were taking a bunch of the revenue we were making and bringing them to kids that we support in our restaurants. They work at our restaurants. They're from the Food Education Fund. And it turned into something where we're not serving still. Like, we started in the first week of June, and we're going to go forever because of this 501c3 that we started. We've served 400,000 meals now, and they come in weekly grocery bags. And what's been cool is all these high school students in New York, they'll pick up the bags from us in 4 locations on Tuesday, and then they'll go on Instagram and flex on each other to say, I made this with this ingredient. And Missy's gotten involved. I've gotten involved. A lot of our chefs have gotten involved on Instagram cooking alongside these kids. And it's something that's always going to happen. And fortunately, it's a new company for us, the pasta company. But this other component where we are able to raise money for our fund and invest it directly into things that we love and want to impact immediately.
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, there was a thing, and also one thing I wrote about last year in North Carolina was a group of restaurants, and you know what they did was they sort of, you know, because it's great that if you can get fresh pasta or you can get arepas or you can get, you know, a salad or whatever it is, but they sort of would once a week come together, and you could order in one website and you could get barbecue from someone and, you know, vegetables from a farm and whatever. And it was one pickup. And it was sort of just this, you know, it wasn't something you couldn't have done before. It was just something no one ever did before. And you would go and get all this stuff. And it's interesting that everybody's doing it, but also the sort of the way that community you were talking about building can come together so that, you know, you have an extra revenue stream, but also, you know, we eaters have high quality food that we didn't really have access to before unless we came and put our butt in a chair in a restaurant, which I think is interesting. Nicole, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, you know, it just made me think about one of the beautiful unintended consequences of delivering meals to our neighbors who really needed it. I mean, aside from being truly connected to our community, when we were, you know, delivering these meals, all of a sudden I look around and it's giving our employees during a really scary time a sense of purpose. Mm-hmm. I said, whoa, there are people, and it gave us perspective that there's always someone out there that's even greater need than we are right now, and that's going through even more. And together we would talk about that while we were, you know, trying to social distance in the restaurant with PPE, you know, over a stove, your shield is fogging up, you're scared, you have to take public transportation to get into work. I mean, these are really scary times for restaurant workers that didn't have the ability to go home and work behind a computer and quarantine at home. Yeah.
I mean, but this is a good pivot, actually. See, I did it again, to technology. I was going to dig into taxes and wages, but just you know, we're already running out of time, which always happens on these things. And I want to talk about diners. And, you know, one of the things that you were telling me about is how you have embraced technology by necessity, but how it's really changed the way you're doing your business. So tell us a little bit about, you know, online ordering, because I think that also relates to safety and, you know, and I mean, it came about because of safety, but it also changes the way we're dining in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, a couple things happened when the shutdown first hit. We had to decide as now a very small team, what are we going to do to survive? And we had to act really fast. So, you know, I was, you know, in a position where I just said, let's throw everything at the wall and see what sticks at this point, just to get through. And what I realized in that moment is giving our team the freedom to just try new things and make mistakes can be risky, but at the same time, it can really pay off. And so what the team was doing, which really blew me away, was investing more in marketing when a lot of people were pulling back during the time in marketing, because we knew we had to reach our customers where they were, which is no longer on 18th and Walnut, right in front of our restaurant in a very busy part of the city. We had to reach them in their homes. That's a totally different model. We were lucky that we had just invested right before the pandemic in our technology and our digital infrastructure, so that we were able to lean into that even more. And just to give you a quick stat on how the landscape changed so dramatically. When pre-pandemic, we were doing about 15% of our sales in online ordering and delivery. Currently, almost post-pandemic, I guess, we're still doing 60, yeah, fingers crossed, we're still doing 65% of our revenue.
Right.
Digital. So we're an entirely different business. We're a tech company in some ways now. So, you know, I look at our digital online ordering system as our new brick and mortar.
Right.
And one thing that came out of, and you mentioned this in the beginning, whenever there's a crisis, a national or global crisis, at the end, we usually see some really great innovation to industry or our community as a whole. And one thing is happening right now is this shift towards ghost kitchens, which I think is a game changer for many growing restaurant companies. You know, we're able to de-risk our model. We're able to reach our guests through delivery in a way that we were never able to before. And in some ways I resisted it at first because, you know, it changes your food, changes the menu in many ways, changes how you do business. But I now see it as a great opportunity to, in our case, further our mission of bringing plant-based foods to millions of people everywhere. We can do that now in a very different way. And delivery has definitely changed the game for restaurants in many ways.
What about our other panelists who have sort of more traditional sit-down restaurants? What technology are we going to keep, and what are we going to say goodbye to after the pandemic? I mean, and I guess I would ask you that about technology, but also about other things. Like, one thing you had to do probably was make your menus smaller. You're going to keep them smaller? I mean, that makes a lot more sense from a cost perspective and things like that. What are the sort of like jump out things that you think are going to stick with us post-pandemic? Sean, Irena, or Ellen?
I think from 2016 to 18, there were some really amazing innovations with technology that helped our restaurants. Technology that was cheaper for us to use and allowed us to see what was actually happening in our restaurants in a clearer way. And I think that going into the pandemic, we're now starting to see some more innovation happen, which was desperately needed. QR codes were around forever, and now they're helping us at the restaurants ordering, but also helping me with this new form of hospitality in your home. So when you get a bag of pasta from us, or specialty goods, or a bottled Negroni, a QR code's there, and you'll get video of our beverage director talking to you about our Negroni. This is now a new form of hospitality where I get to touch your table in your home when I'm not even physically there, but I still get to tell stories and educate you and show you love as you're eating delicious food. But I think going forward, technology is the most exciting part of our industry, because it has to make businesses more profitable. It has to make operations more efficient. And ultimately, it's going to make guests happier. And I think there is so many great things ahead for technology that, for whatever reason, the past 2 years kind of stagnated a little bit. But this portion of time has kind of like kickstarted it again. And QR codes is just one, and it was like a dinosaur, and it's awesome that people are now using them again. I was scared of them. I still don't like the look of it, but they help me. But I think now we're going to be able to see better POS systems, better labor management, better inventory management, like all of these things that were desperately needed. They're kind of going to happen now, because restaurant owners are going to have to be more empowered to be business operators and operationally more efficient. And ultimately, that just makes people feel more fulfilled when they leave your restaurants.
Ellen or Irena?
Well, for us, unfortunately, the takeout and delivery does not work very well. People love to come to our restaurant. It's always been a place where people feel, particularly comfortable, and they like the whole ambiance, because we created a culture. Like Nicole, you talk a lot about the culture. So our environment is very cohesive with the food, the beverage, the environment, the people, music, etc. So as soon as we opened, our whole delivery thing, went down. And so it doesn't travel well. First of all, even the arepas don't travel well after 10 minutes. So we had to create a complete other, we moved to a place that is very, very committed. Its community definitely supports the restaurants. And so for us to attract people to our location and the outdoor development, now the city has passed, this idea that we can prolong the outdoor dining. That'll be a really wonderful thing. And then technology, it's another part, Sean, like you're talking about, but also within our staff, just retraining and rethinking our whole realities with our entire staff, no matter what position they've had, and using their talent, like we were talking yesterday, using all of people's talents to come up with great ideas and to make the restaurant live and in a very healthy way. And also lifting everybody in the staff. So no longer are the formal, positions that everybody has, but we have a hostess that is brilliant and who brings in strategies for the restaurant that really belong normally to general management, ideas, and she's bringing them up. The food runners, the same thing. So now we are a complete different group, and we remain small, so our menu stays small. But that's what we're doing. And I like this human aspect of it, where we're looking at our staff in a complete different way, and they're participating in a different way.
You know, Ellen, I wanted to let you answer that question, but we really are running out of time. So I'm going to ask you a different one, if that's okay, which is, you know, one of the things that's really important is that you guys have all changed so much, so fast, with so much difficulty, but there's a certain responsibility of the diner as well. And Larry alluded at the beginning of this that he was tipping, and I don't think we have time to get into tipping front of the house and wage laws, but, you know, what do you think that diners have learned, or do they still need to learn in order that we all move forward and have a healthier, more sustainable restaurant business for you and for us? So, you know, it's not just restaurants have to change, it's diners have to change. And what do you think you've seen, and what do you think people still need to learn? Because I know this audience in particular is very interested in working to build healthier communities.
Well, certainly, you know, I feel that I have changed a lot. You know, I'm actually invigorated by all the changes that have taken place, and I think a lot of my colleagues are too. You know, I think that in terms of our guest experience, you know, at the very beginning of the pandemic, so many people miss dining out, and we miss serving guests. I mean, that is our, you know, one of our sole purposes is to be hospitable and to greet and to take care of people and all that. But I do think that, you know, over time, a lot about the restaurant scene has shifted because of the growth of restaurants. So, you know, the labor shortage is not something that's new. The labor shortage in 2019 was a major issue. 2019, early 2020, you know, hiring was extremely difficult. And, you know, I think a lot of us were looking then at how to be more competitive in terms of ensuring that we have a great staff. And, you know, I think that customers have been extremely generous, and we appreciate all the support of our teams by the community, by, you know, people in the past when maybe you got takeout, maybe you didn't leave at 20%, 25%, 33% tip, but people are being extremely generous to our teams right now. What we need to figure out is how to divvy that up in a way that's a little bit more fair. And part of that is the antiquated wage and hour law. You know, you said something earlier, and I wanted to disagree with it, was that you said that restaurants have notoriously been one of the lowest paying positions. That's actually not true.
I knew I was going to get in trouble for that. Fair enough.
That's actually not true. I mean, even our back of the house staff, you know, at one point we were trying to figure out how can we figure out a system where we basically could salary our back of the house employees. And we backtracked it because we have to follow the law. I mean, the law says that if you work over 40 hours a week, you have to pay overtime. So we backtracked it to figure out an hourly rate that made sense, so that our you know, highest, you know, our highest line cooks could be, you know, 42,000, you know, 5 years ago, something like that. And, you know, but then when competition for wages became so great, and you're telling your person, well, you're going to work 55, 60 hours a week and you're going to make 42,000, but you're going to get paid $8.25 an hour, and somebody else comes along and says, well, you're going to get $15 an hour, say, or whatever. You know, even though we were guaranteeing that total salary, you know, the comparison is by the hourly rate. And that's, you know, so I don't want to make it seem like, you know, we're only paying $20,000 a year. Some of these people, I mean, my payroll for Fork is over $2 million. That's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, again, we only have a couple minutes, and I have a couple questions that I want to get to from the attendees, but I will just go back to Sean to talk briefly about, so the issue with wages is that there are certain rules that require the way that people can be tipped out, right? And I hope I get this right, that, you know, when you tip, it doesn't necessarily go to everyone in the restaurant. You're only allowed to give it to people who serve. So if the person's in the kitchen, they don't get the tips, but there are ways around it, pooled tips, and they tip out and all these things. And so one of the things that this IRC group has come that is still talking about is like, how do we fix this, right? So can you tell us briefly, because it's not an easy subject, but just briefly so we can get to these last couple questions, like what are some of the things that you guys are talking about as a group, either in New York and nationally, to try to fix the wage issue?
Sure. So it is a very complicated solution, but it's going to be fixed. It's not impossible. It's not rocket science. It's just going to be a relentless pursuit of compassion and creativity, which is the main ingredients of hospitality. Basically, how the restaurant industry works right now is everybody gets a wage if you're not on salaried as a manager. And the front of house, anybody that's guest facing in New York City gets $10.50 an hour, which is below the minimum wage. But they all get to participate in the tip pool at the end of the night. The back of the house, the people that are now guest serving, the people that are making the food that people are serving you are not legally allowed to participate in tips. And there's so many laws that prohibits us from playing any sort of games besides paying them just an outrageously high wage. Everybody in our restaurant is, from the dishwasher to our bartenders, servers, managers, are anywhere from $65,000 to $110,000 a year. They are thriving, every single person in our restaurant. However, the current setup is not fair. We all in this industry want to make it more fair. The problem is we can't afford to at this moment. Most restaurants cannot afford to. What I mean by that is, if we were to raise everybody in the front of house wages from $10.50 to $15 and bring everybody in the back of house that isn't allowed to participate in tips from $20, $22 down to $15, that would be awesome, and have everybody participate in tips. Amazing. That's what we want. However, it falls on the restaurant owner and business, because the wages that are increasing from $10.50 to $15, most of the people in our restaurants are front of house. Therefore, we're paying more in labor if that's the case. Unfortunately, the way restaurants are set up, the math problem of restaurants is completely broken, and they can't afford to do the right thing. This is the right thing. Everybody must participate in these tips. We just have to figure out ways creatively to allow businesses to afford them. The reasons why we can't: we pay 7 to 10% a week in our sales in payroll taxes. We are regulated through insurances. We're regulated in liquor taxes. We think we could potentially come up with many combinations of solutions that could possibly give us back some of that money and give to our employees with that increase in salary, and then everybody gets the tips. If we can get that, everybody in our restaurant will make as much or more than they made before. That's what we must fight for. That's what we're going to fight for.
Yeah, and I mean, thank you for doing such a good job explaining that. And it is both complicated and sort of simple, but it's just how you get from one to the other. So we just have a couple minutes left. I want to get to a question which is a complete 180, and I'm going to throw it open to anyone who wants to answer it, which was, how has the pandemic impacted restaurant sourcing relationships, particularly with local and regional farmers? And what is the current state of future of farm to fork in light of these shifting priorities? So anybody want to jump in on whether your relationship with farmers has changed and how?
We are still committed to buying as much as we possibly can from our local farmers. You know, the same relationships that we started 25 years ago, we're continuing to support. But interestingly enough, where the supply chain is broken is actually in our everyday commodities, in supplies, in dry goods and things like that. Every company who we buy from has been complaining to us about the same problem that we're complaining about, the shortage of employees. The drivers, one company told me that they were a company that delivered to Washington, Baltimore, Philadelphia, and New York. They have 50% of the drivers that they had pre-pandemic, and they can't hire enough drivers. So they stopped the New York market and they stopped the DC market. And you know, they basically told us they couldn't provide adequate service. Same with packaged products like paper and bags and things like that. Nicole, I don't know if you have any problems with consistency of the product, but like, you know, as a bakery, we count on consistency of our packaging and whatnot. And sometimes even that is disrupted. But fortunately, our farmers, they often have to do the deliveries themselves. So they are impacted, but we love, you know, being able to continue working with them. Their problem is just predicting demand.
Right, right. Nicole, did you want to jump in on that question?
Yeah, absolutely. To piggyback off of what Ellen said, yeah, so many of this, you know, of our suppliers have their business as well has been interrupted and disrupted. Takeout bags, who knew there would be a shortage on takeout bags?
Right.
And, you know, even compostable materials, we use 100% compostable in our restaurant group, and there was a shortage there. Texas, when they had their, the major, you know, natural disaster there, they had issues with glue. Their glue on the handle bags for takeout bags, there's a shortage there. So a lot of things have been happening the past year for sure. And we're all seeing, I think the labor shortage is affected. It's nationwide and it's across industry for sure.
Okay, I'm sending my child away. Go away. Go away. No, go away. I don't know what happens. Hey, we all had our BBC moment, right? I don't know what she wants, but the answer is no. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up with one quick question, which is around for everybody. Optimistic? Are you optimistic about the future of restaurants compared to sort of where we were before this happened? I mean, do you feel like we are headed somewhere better and more exciting?
Well, I'll take that first. I mean, I'm an eternal optimist. I think restaurateurs have to be because it's such a difficult industry.
Self-selecting group here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when, you know, whenever there is crisis on the other side, there is opportunity to do better, be better, and to do good. So I see a bright future. It was a very long, dark tunnel this past year, full of challenges, and there still is. But, you know, I think two things that our customer learned, because you asked that question earlier. The first is that everyone's greatest hobby is going out to restaurants.
Yep.
And number two, that our workers are truly essential. Everyone needed restaurant workers to feed them through the pandemic.
Right.
So I think that the future is bright because I think people appreciate restaurants more now than ever.
Okay, I'm going to go to Irena next.
I am also, like Nicole, very optimistic as a person. And I really thank life for giving us this opportunity this whole last year. With the efforts that we did to survive, we actually connected so much more to the city of Baltimore in general. So we feel that we're not just this place where people go to eat, but we're also, you know, we live in our community, we live in our city and for our city. And it's just opened so many windows also in the way we lead our profession, not just within, you know, our households in the sense of Alma itself, but also with the city, food policy, community leaders, and just people in general. So it's a much more interesting time right now. And I really love to see a restaurant, you know, completely integrated in a city. So that's why I have optimism, and I think that that's the future, and I really love it. It's a ton more work, even more than we already have, as we know, but I am committed to continue.
Great. Sean, next.
I think the future's never been brighter or more delicious. It's never more important or necessary to create inspiring dining experiences to help make your day better. We bring people together that are welcomed, who look nothing alike or come from different places. The arc of the moral universe is long, and it definitely bends towards great things and justice. And we are the force. The future of hospitality is the force that bends it sooner and quicker. I think that while we've learned guests might love as a hobby to come to restaurants. I think we now must make sure that our restaurants don't look like hobbies and are more profitable and healthier,
right.
Are more operationally efficient. I think that the communication of the community of restaurant owners and the people who make it up can't stop now, and they must press. Restaurants are invited to all of the tables now. We don't get up and leave. We have to press. I think that technology is going to lead us to the next chapter. That's very exciting. And understanding that what we've created, the restaurants, the experiences that we do every single night for people who we don't know, it's built something that's very powerful, a brand and a loyal following that absolutely can and must be monetized outside of the four walls.
Right.
That is why the future is going to be amazing. So don't stop.
All right, and our hometown hero, Ellen Yin, closing us out. Optimistic?
I'm absolutely optimistic. I'm inspired by my colleagues. They are doing incredible work, but also this community, Philadelphia, has been an incredible support over the past year and a half. And I just want to thank everybody because you know, we have a lot of work to do, but you know, already we're seeing people come back to the city. We're seeing people you know, really be committed to helping all segments of our community. And, you know, I couldn't be more fortunate to be surrounded by so many people who care. So I don't want to talk too long because I know we have not enough time, but it's been an incredible, it has been actually a really inspiring 18 months.
Yeah, I mean, well, I am so grateful for all of you being here, and I am not an optimistic person at all, but I agree that, you know, this has really been, sorry, everything's going wrong in my house. Things are ringing, children are walking in. I'm optimistic that my next panel, there will be no interruptions. But I do feel very much like as a diner, I always appreciated restaurants because it was what I wrote about, but I think everyone understands them better now, and everyone appreciates them, and everyone realizes how they are the fabric of our lives and wants to support them. And my hope is that restaurateurs will continue not only to talk to policymakers and, you know, regulators, but to their clientele so that they do understand how things work and can be helpful, because I think they want to, you know, but we've all grown up in a culture where the customer's always right? So just give me what I want and I leave. So I think that everybody's ready to do that. And I hope you ask people to step up. And thank you for joining us. And thank you to everyone in the audience. And we'll see you next time. Thanks.